I am right now.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll
yes.
just,
yeah,
Now
all
it
right.
is going.
yeah.
Sorry.
So,
After the secret tip's been told, that wasn't recorded. That was just for
right,
you
that was for
guys.
you guys. Now it's recorded. Now we're going to go to the not so secret stuff.
They're not so secret. That was it.
So, well, welcome. Good morning, you guys. Thank you for you guys for coming here. I actually like, to be honest with you, there's times where I like small groups. It's just something about the intimacy is good for me. So I'm cool with this, and this is going to be coaching. I don't know if you guys are interested in coaching. Are you guys coaches? Because if you're not, or if you're not interested, we can take another path, because Ankush and I are coaches, obviously, but he's very, very familiar with the principles. I think that's, yeah,
So I'm not a coach, but I'm interested in I do marketing and communication workshop, and I'm interested in taking it into communication in a way,
perfect.
how people can improve the way they communicate.
Perfect. Okay.
So
Well, I
it's
guess,
not coaching, but
yeah, and coaching as a term is, yeah, coaching, all that means is I have something to share. I'm going to share it with you. We're going to have a relationship where you pay me and I talk to you about something that I'm sharing. Call that
okay,
coaching, marketing, whatever
okay.
profession you want to call it. So coaching is just a blanket term for me. Maybe Ankush has a different idea.
Well, I think, you and I spoke, and Amir, and I think really this was about the business of coaching. I think, your group and my group as well, and there's a lot of other stuff out there. There's a lot of content being produced, and there are a lot of programs and a lot of things about understanding what the three principles are, right? Or what the three principles are, as someone said. Um, but yet there's much less understanding around, okay, so now I understand this stuff, or I understand a bit of it and I can see it's helpful. How do I take this out into the world, right? How do I help other people see this, and ideally get paid for doing that, for this work? And I think this is, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but my thought process was, well, that's what we would be talking about today. And the really cool thing about that is that it doesn't really matter if you're a coach or if you're something else, right? Like if you want to take this into a marketing arena, if you want to take this into, like, I spoke to a magician yesterday who was actually a really good magician. He's a member of the Inner Magic Circle. There's only 200 members in the world ish. He, quite, won Close-Up Magician of the Year 2013. This guy's quite well, good at what he does. And we were just talking, and we were having a conversation, and we started talking about his business, and it was so interesting to me because whilst he's a magician rather than a coach, the things that he was talking to me about and the things I was talking to him about were actually very, very similar. Now, there are some differences. People tend to know what a magician is. They don't tend to know as much as what a coach is. But it's the same sort of thing. It's around, delivering a personal service and getting paid to do that. And he was talking about how in his industry, it's very difficult to make a living. And I mean, really, I never thought about this, but if you think about it, it must be pretty difficult as a magician to make a living full-time being a magician, right? Like, what do you do 5 days of the week? Practice your tricks, and then maybe on a Saturday night you get booked somewhere. Like, there are not very many magic shows. There's a few people who do well. There's people who go on Britain's Got Talent or America's Got Talent or something like that. But apart from that, it's pretty difficult. So there's a number of similarities there. And so I think it's great that you want to talk about how do I take the principles into a communication workshop or anything, because there's so many similarities. I don't know what you think about that, Amir.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm a magician. I did that for a long time. I still do, but now just for fun. But I love the analogy, and it's absolutely true. And in our community, what I'm noticing, especially in the principles. For some reason in NLP, it wasn't that big of a deal. And when I was a hypnotherapist, but as soon as like in our community, maybe because the principles are considered spiritual and it's, you know, it goes deep into the heart of who we are, that as soon as money gets brought up, and I was going through that for a while too. So I'll be honest. I didn't know how to reconcile sharing something that's so needed out into the world, and then somewhere in there trying to jam in, well, I'm going to charge you for what I'm going to tell you. That's probably going to be really helpful for your family. And then I went and thought about it, and I went, but I don't think about that when I go to my doctor. Like, I'm happy to pay my doctor. I'm happy to pay. I just went to a parenting coaching class that wasn't even principles. I was happy to pay her. And then I went from the other end as a consumer, and I said, you know, how unfair would it be that like I won't have access to somebody else because they're too busy being insecure about their thinking about their business. Like I love that that person makes enough money that they can spend time going to different places and getting into venues and renting it so they can spend time with me. I think that's really valuable. For example, Ankush and I, because we make money, we're able to devote an hour here and do what we do, right? So it's become for me a synergistic thing for me that sharing the principles, making money sharing the principles allows me to go and share more of it, allows me to spend more time with people, whether that's to get clients or to volunteer my time, whatever. So I don't have that distinction. But to answer your question, we'll get to what you said about, so how do I bring this into an environment that you have that's not really related to principles or like spirituality, and we can get into that if you want to, Kush.
Yeah, I just had a picture in my head, you know, because I had it too. Like there were a few forums, and there were a couple of people who were kind of, you know, talking about, you know, this is bad that people are charging money and people are charging too much money, and you know, you shouldn't be charging money for this because people need it. And as you were just talking, I was thinking about it. I wonder if those same people go into supermarkets and start telling people off for selling food, because we need food to live, right? How dare they charge for food? The farmers, they just grow it in the land, right? Just why not? Why sell it? And it's funny because we don't think about it. We don't think about like going into Tesco's or whatever your local supermarket. You bastards! How dare you? How dare you? How dare you profit off something that people need? They sell water, goddammit. Not even just food, food and water, right? What are they going to charge us for, an air next? You know, but it's crazy, and it comes down to a misunderstanding around money, and I think it also comes down to a misunderstanding around worthiness. I think that's often at the, you know, the core of, for coaches often, that, and also true for people who are not coaches but want to go, like, who's going to listen to me? Who's going to pay me? What am I worth? Right? And for me, what was really useful when I started coaching a few years ago was realizing, to the level I did, I'm not saying I realized it 100%, and thoughts still come up, but there was a part of me that knew that there was so much power in the principles, there was so much power in the content, if you like, that it wasn't about me, right? And I love the post that you wrote, was it today or yesterday, you wrote about how you make money from Michael Neal, and sharing his stuff. I love that, because that's what I did. I did it with Jamie stuff, I do it with Michael stuff, I do it with Steve Chandler stuff, because for me, this really started from a place of insecurity. Like when I started coaching and people started paying me money, I was like, oh crap, I'm not going to be as good as those guys. How can I make sure that the client has a transformation? How can I make sure the client gets something? And I was like, well, get them to read Jamie's book, get them to read Michael's book, get them to check this out. Because even if I'm rubbish, at the worst case, they're still going to read these great books from these wonderful authors, right? But what I realized over time was, even though that came from a place of insecurity, it was the content, the principles do the heavy lifting, right? So if you're talking about like communication, I did a workshop, God. So I got introduced to the principles properly got introduced to them, September 2012. I kind of read about them about 6 months earlier, but about 2012, I started training with them. And about 3 or 4 months later, I did a workshop, and I went to my boss, and he knew I was doing some coach training. He didn't know really what it was about. And I said, can I do something at work? Right. I like just put myself forward. And I said, maybe I can talk to you about state of mind and how helpful it could be. And he said, great. He said, but what I really want is I really want people my team, I want them to understand stakeholder management. And if anyone's listening to this who doesn't understand what stakeholder management is, it's basically you have key people. If you're in a support function in an organization, let's say you're in accounting, you'll have stakeholders. You'll have people in different other functions who are key relationships for you. That's what stakeholder is. And stakeholder management is basically, how can we keep them on side? How can we, get them to our side of thinking? How can we challenge them? So I was like, okay, how the hell am I going to talk about stakeholder management and the principles? And this is 3 months in. And so what I did was I went out and Jamie helped me with this, and Chantal Burns helped me with this. And there was a number of people, I forgot the lady's name, from Cheryl Bond helped me with this, Dave Kibbe. I went out and just asked people for help, right? And what I came back with was, I went and found a presentation on stakeholder management from some content we had through work, right? And I was like, okay, what do the experts say about it? And they were saying that to be really good at stakeholder management, you need to have a good relationship with people, right? You need to bring them on board, but you also need to challenge them. And the sweet spot is where they're like, you've got that relationship, you're on side, but then you're also strongly challenging them. Whereas if they just like you, but you don't challenge them, nothing changes. If you challenge them, but they think you're a so-and-so, nothing gets done. So it's that sweet spot. So I presented that, and then I went, okay, what stops us getting there? And what stops us getting there is, and I just talked about our state of mind, right? If you're up in your head, you might not challenge a stakeholder because he's more senior or she's more senior than you. You're scared, right? Also, what stops you having a better relationship with someone is when you're all up in your head too. It's like very, very basic, very simple. And I did this, Benedict. How do I pronounce your name? Because I think I keep messing it up. Please let me know.
Benedict.
Benedict. Okay, I'll try and pronounce that properly.
If not, you can call me Bene or Benedict. The way you pronounce it is fine. I've been in the UK for 15 years, so I'm used to
You're used to English people butchering your name. Okay. So I went and did this, and I got a load of challenge, right? I got a load of challenge off people where they were like, well, that's not true. And I was there, and we got to the end, and it was about 3 hours that I did, and I did a little exercise. And I was, like I said, I was very new to the principles. I'd never delivered a training course in my life. These were my colleagues who were big piss takers and jokers. And if they didn't like something, they weren't shy about coming forward. And at the end of the 3 hours, I thought, oh God, thank God I made it through. Like, just thank God I made it through that, and they didn't rip me apart. And they came back and they said, that was the best workshop we've ever received on stakeholder management. And we think every person in this company should receive this workshop, right? And it's not because I was amazing. Oh, Kush is so good. I was terrible. I was all over the place, right? If I did it again now, I would have done it very, very differently. But it was because of the content. It was because of the principles. So it's the same thing with you, that if you talk to people about communication, you can take anything that you already talked to them about communication and think about the implication of the principles, and then talk about that. So if you want to talk about, like, one of the things, I was actually a communication expert. I was a communication champion back in the day in my corporate job. One of the things that you got asked to do this will be good for you, which means take on a more responsibility and you'll get no extra pay, is a subtext for that. But I learned it was good because I learned a bit about communication. And one of the things that we were taught, for example, is communication is about, one of the things is about getting the appropriate communication for what you're trying to communicate. Now, let's say you had a workshop about that sometimes written communication's really good for, a lot of text and graphics and documents, but something that's really going to affect people, and ideally you want to talk to them about it. I got all this training. Now again, why do people not do that? Because that's kind of common sense. And the reason often that people don't talk to someone and send an email is because they're rushing, right? And they think it's going to save them time, so they're rushing around, right? A side effect of a busy state of mind is rushing. And so let me just send a quick email out rather than picking up the phone.
And I think people see the task instead of seeing the people. They think of the task to do and not of the people they're talking to.
Right.
One question I have for you. So when you did that workshop, did you explain the whole idea being the whole 3 principles, or did you just talk about the implication?
I only talk about one principle. I think 3's too much. I picked my favorite one, which is thought. I'm being a bit facetious. No, I didn't talk about the principles. I didn't sit down and say, well, there's a guy called Sid. He was, from Scotland, and then he came over to Canada and he was a welder. I didn't tell the whole story because I had 3 hours, right? So you can't, and people don't care. And I didn't want to be branded as a weirdo more than I was already. So, I just went with in those days, I went with a very simple concept of state of mind. And one of the things that I find is that in our community, am I allowed to be a little bit controversial, Amir? Is that okay? Okay, cool. So this may be controversial, it may not. One of the things I find in our community is we get so hung up on how do we share the principles, right? Like, what do we call it? Am I doing, and that's why I think a lot of people get caught up on, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Am I, doing this, doing that? But I think, that just slows everyone down. So when I started out, I started talking about state of mind. That's all I knew. It's not really that accurate. The principles aren't really about state of mind. That's kind of one implication, one subset of the principles, but it doesn't matter. I just want someone to hear something, right? I want to kind of open the door. I mean, I'm doing this new podcast for business, and I got 20 minutes to 30 minutes. We can't explain the principles to people in 20, 30 minutes, and it's a challenge, but it's been a fun challenge to do because I've got different people to come in and talk about one aspect of business, whether it's leadership or teams or dealing with difficult people. And then we just talk about it on that level, knowing, for us, knowing the principles are true. Does that answer your question? Cool. I've been talking a lot, Amir. Is there anything you want to kind of say? You're muted right now. You're still muted.
Wow, I was double muted. Okay, I have a mute on here and on my computer. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so I was saying that I love that what you said, because it sounds like you have specific experience in with what Benny asked for, and let me add something that people don't talk about. I'm reading a book by Cal Newport called Deep Work, and one of the things he says is he's a professor, and he writes about social media, but he doesn't have any, right? Interestingly enough. And one of the things that he found out is that the biggest, highest performers that are in his field, he's a MIT graduated math. He's a mathematician, and like he was talking about some of the old greats, they would have specific places they would go and just do their thinking for hours on end. And I went, wow, that's so neat. And the times where I get actually my biggest ideas isn't when I'm jamming on Facebook. It's when I'm just doing my own thing by myself for hours on end, right? You guys probably know that. Here's what we have going for us. When we go into companies and organizations, when I go to the recovery center, the fact that I'm getting them off of the grid and they're spending an hour, and I spend about 20 minutes saying, get used to this for a minute. We're going to slow down. Get used to this experience. Now, when you go to an organization that's always spinning and they're always fast, that alone carries most of my gigs. When I spend an hour with a coaching client, the fact that I'm not in a rush to get them somewhere does tremendous value, and I haven't even gotten to the principles yet. We don't take into consideration that we're in an industry that allows us to flourish because we're slowing them down to the speed of life. So it's funny because people right away, what do? We try to speed it up and go, how do I bring the principles in? Da, 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 da. What do I do with this? And the irony is the very thing that you want to share is, calm down. There's no need for principles yet. I don't even know what you need. Let's just have a dialogue for a minute. And if the worst happens in an hour is we just had a cool dialogue, then so be it. But again, what's nice about the principles is it's built in. What do we say when we first start a conversation? Today's not going to be about strategy. Today's going to be the opposite. I just want you to be in the room with me. How many of you guys get that opportunity just to be in a room without having to have much on your mind? You get to take the day off for the next hour. Now, you start that in a group that's spinning. You'll see this. Like, wow, someone just gave me permission. This is for work, but I get an hour of just doing nothing. That alone, you can literally just sit in silence for the next hour. They will get more out of that than if you spend 20, giving them 20 strategies. So you're already ahead of the game. So you don't have to worry, how do I introduce the principles? Because that's way ahead of the game. Get them to see that they're settling, that where they're at, that their okayness to show up with whatever's on their mind is perfectly fine. Like that I don't know if that's a strategy or not, but in my recovery center, that was the biggest eye opener when I asked my group, I said, what's the best thing you've learned from what I've taught you? And their response was, this is the only hour I don't feel like an addict. Like I didn't think how valuable that was. Like I thought it's because I was putting all this shit on the wall about the principles and mind consciousness and thought. I'm putting Michael Neal videos. I thought that's what was getting them to go, wow, Amir's amazing. And it wasn't. It's because they can actually show up for the first time for many of us, including us. We get to show up to be human for once, which is a very big rarity in our world now. You guys know what I'm talking about? You guys know what I mean? That in of itself is tremendous value. That in of itself. So when we're asking, how do I share the principles? Get that off the table. That will emerge as you sit there in that deep work, in that deep space. You'll know what to say. And the companies normally go, I've worked with a couple companies like, I don't know what you did in this room, but we felt so much lighter this whole week. It's like we always hear that kind of stuff. And they give me the credit, which is funny, but it's simply because they got to settle for a minute. They got to get back into their humanity and being connected. So that's a really sidestepping way of answering something that gives us an opportunity to say we're way ahead of the game because we know this. Not because we actually know the principles, but because we know the essence behind it. Ankush, I wanted you to answer a question Jacob has been asking for a couple times in my group, and I think it's a great question. And Jacob, do you want me to tell him what it is, or do you want to go ahead and, I think you should. You tell him. The question about when do we...
I have no idea. Oh, the serving. Like
yeah,
the serving.
I think it's a good question.
Yeah, I like to say, every call now, I'm like, I'm not going to say anything because I feel like, what's the point? But what you just said about, I think when people ask, how do I share the principles? And we get the response of, why do we get in our heads and why are we... I think what you just said is exactly what people ask. Like, how do you share the principles is like, obviously something I already do is like, okay, it's not about, it's a description, not a prescription, or, just leave everything that you think, just leave it outside today. We just have a deep breath and let's just spend some time together. I think that's what people ask when they say, how do we share these principles? I mean, that's like, that for me is a phenomenal answer. Like, it's not a strategy, but it's like almost for me confirmation, as in, yeah, I get that. So that's, I just wanted to point out, like, for me, it's like when people ask, how do you share the principle? It's not about, should I talk about SID or should I talk about mind, consciousness, thought? No, it's more like, how do you set it up, or how do you, without setting it up, if that. So I think it's a brilliant, for me, that would be a brilliant answer to the question, how do I share the principles? Is like, well, what I do is I tell people, just forget everything, just, whatever. The question that you refer to is like, when do you stop as a coach, right? I don't know if everybody in here is a coach, but when as a coach do you stop? When do you introduce the concept of working together where there is an exchange of money? Because I know Amir is from the Rich Litvin philosophy, and I see that and I read it. I think it's phenomenal. I read a page and say, you go out there and just serve and don't be worried. And then I turn the page and it says, if they say yes, then you have to sign up straight away and you have to get their money. And then I take the next page and then you say, well, if they say yes, you have to question the yes and you have to really push them and really think, should you not ask them to have a think about it and talk about it with their spouse? So it, like, when is it, I've added value, it's been great, now let's I don't know. Even asking the question feels inauthentic for me. Like, when are we going to talk about the money? When are we going to, so I can feed my family, or I can, pay the internet bill so we can actually talk. Things like that. When is it I stop just giving, and now we're going to talk about making it more of a, I don't even know how to name it, a coaching relationship, professional, whatever.
I missed a little bit of that because my computer decided to do something funny, but I think I caught the gist of it. See, I probably had a question similar to that a few years ago, and I was coming from, like you say, I was coming from this place of, how much do I need to serve so that they'll just bloody pay me, right? Like you say, I need to pay the bills. The internet's not going to pay for itself. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be friendly and smiley, but you better bloody pay me at the end of it, because otherwise you're dead to me, right? And and Steve Chandler and I just finished up a program where he was talking about that, how he used to do the same thing. It's like, if you don't sign up, you're dead to me. Don't contact me again and waste more of my time. And it's funny because you're right, it's inauthentic. And you can't I don't think you can cheat that. When I talk to people, I found that if I'm really like, when are you going to pay me? This is a job, right? I need to get paid for my time, and I'm wanting something, and I'm needy about it. It comes across, it's like, like you're going to buy a car, and you can tell before you go into a car showroom, you can tell if the guy is really creepy and needy, and or whether the guy's like, look, I've got a bunch of cars, maybe, if they're right for you and you want to buy it, then I can do a good deal for you, and this is what they're at, and they're not needy at all. And the second salesman is the kind of salesman that we all would prefer to deal with, compared to the guy who's just, please buy a car off me because, I haven't made commission for ages and I'm about to get sacked. So, I really need this deal. No one wants to buy a car off a guy like that. And in the same way, no one wants a coach who's like that too. So this, for me, is deeper than, when do I make the proposal? You know, I often say to people, the point at which people think the problem is with coaching, that's not where the problem is, or that's not where we need to adjust things. We need to go further back than that. So, I mean, one thing is I make it really clear I'm a coach. I make it really clear I'm a professional coach, and I do this for a living. And I that's clear through things I communicate. Like, go onto my Facebook. It's really clear what I do for a living. I'm not shy, right? It's clear. My LinkedIn is very clear. My website, everything else. This is what I do. I'm a full-time professional, right? But also it's how I subcommunicate. So when someone wants to talk to me, I'll schedule a time, right? I'll send them a meeting invite. I'll confirm it. Exactly how I would do when I was in a corporate job. I show up the same. I treat it, you know, in the same way. I remember talking to a coach a few years ago, and she was charging €100 a session or something like that, approximately. And she said, "Oh, I'm really struggling to charge more. I get clients up to €100, but I don't get more than that." And I said, do you want the honest truth? And she said, yeah, please do. I said, well, first of all, you were 15 minutes late for our call. Are you often late for your calls with clients? Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I wouldn't pay. So I'm surprised you're getting paid €100 if you're turning up late. That's not being a professional, right? Secondly, she called me from a very noisy coffee shop. I said, do you meet clients here? She said, yeah. I said, well, again, that's not a professional environment. You know, there's not some quiet space. You know, if you're going to do it over Skype, if you're going to do it in person, go and find a quiet space. And if you're going to do it online, make sure you're in a quiet place too. Why are you in a coffee shop where it's so noisy and it's distracting, right? And then I talked about clothing, which maybe is not as important, but you know, this is of any salesperson. You know, if I'm going to show up and I'm like half asleep, my hair's all over the place, you might say that now, no, my hair's supposed to look like this. But, you know, it's about being a professional. So I found my subcommunication, my being, if you like, is that of a professional. And then when I work with someone, I'm coaching them. And a lot of people, I say this thing, this pisses some people off. And if it does, I'm kind of sorry, but not sorry. Right? I have coaches say to me, you know what, I'm a really good coach, but no one's paying me. Right? And I pretty much only work with 3P coaches, to be fair, 3 principles coaches. And I'll tell them, you're not that good. And it upsets people. It kind of shocks people. I'm like, but it's good to know. And like Amir talked about this book that he's reading, Deep Work. Coaching is a skill. It's a profession. There is mastery to be gained in the profession of coaching. And I'm learning every single day, right? And I mean this is not just words. Every single day I learn a little bit more. Every single day I make mistakes and I learn from them and I try and improve, right? So now when someone shows up for initial conversation, whether we call it a coaching session or not, and most of the time I don't even call it a coaching session, I show up very differently than I did, say, 3 years ago. So now if someone shows up, I might say to them, you know, let's say someone does ask about coaching or they want to know about more work that I do. I'm going to say to them, why are you talking to me, right? What do you think I can help you with? What's going on? Why haven't you solved this yourself? Right? I want to. That's being a coach. That's whether you're a 3P coach, an NLP coach, any kind of coach, you would ask those questions, right? And really get deep into what's going on with a client. Find out what the world looks like to them. Find out what they really think the challenge is, right? And then start talking about what might be helpful. And what I talk about too is that, you know, I want the client. I'm not trying to sell to the client. Okay. I want the client to really pick me because they think I'm freaking amazing, right? Like it's one of my criteria. Why would I want to work with someone who doesn't think the work that I do is really, really, really valuable? Right? So that's their job to pick me. My job is to be really, really good. Right? And on the flip side, I don't want to work with someone who's a pain in the ass. Right? And this might sound unspiritual or whatever else, but let's be straight here, right? There are some people who coaching just isn't suitable for, right? And I talk to some people, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to refer you to Keith Blevins or Dick Betcher or a psychologist. This is not what I do, right? And I remember I coached a guy several years ago, and in the end I referred him to Keith, and I thought I was a bad coach, and Keith was like, no, this person needs a lot of help. You know, this is not a typical client. So coaching really works best with people who are generally mentally healthy, who want to create something in their life. That's what coaching is about. It's not about deep psychological work, right? So I pick my clients. I'm going to think, is this guy or girl, are they a good fit for me? Do I want to work with them? Is it going to be fun and joyful for me to work with them? Just as much as it is for them to pick me. So it's a two-way street. So I'm really not in a rush. And in fact, when I coach coaches, especially new coaches, I'll say, don't make a proposal after one session. And I know this is kind of form and structure. I'm kind of okay with that. I don't know if you are, Amir, but for me, like as a rule of thumb, it's like spend at least 2 conversations talking to people, right? Because this is a big thing. Let's say the person pays you, however much money it is, right? Let's say this person pays you 1,000 euros. Do you want to get to the stage 4 sessions in where they're going, hey, Jacob, this is shit. I thought I was getting this. I'm not getting it. Can I have my 1,000 euros back? You don't want to be in that position, right? I don't know if you have, Amir. I've been in that position. And I learned from it. It makes sense for me to slow down up front and be really clear, like, is this person going to benefit from working with me? Not everybody will. Am I going to enjoy working with them? So that whole mindset kind of changes it goes from how much do I serve before I make a proposal and like cut the ties, right? Like, shit will get off the pot. You're going to pay me or get lost, stop wasting my time. It's a very different mindset as opposed to you talk to someone and you're interviewing them. You're assessing them to see would they be a good client for you. And you can tell them that. I tell people that. Because people sometimes, and when you're really clear about the fact that you're a professional coach, and you're good at what you do, people will ask you, so how much does it cost to work with you? How much do you charge, right? If someone doesn't ask that, that's part of my criteria. They're not that interested, right? So that's one of my criteria. I want people to ask me how much it costs to work with me. I want people to ask me, what does it look like for us to work together? And they do, right? And I'm going to tell them, well, either it will cost this, or I'm going to say it's too premature because I don't know you well enough. And that's not a manipulation. That's true. I don't want to be, and I'll tell them, I don't want to be in a stage where you sign up and you don't really know what you're getting. And then you'll say, this isn't working for you. That's a waste of my time and your time. So you decide it, first of all, be really clear. Do you want coaching? And I'm going to be looking at you thinking, do I want you as a client? And it's a two-way interaction. The other thing I'll mention is 2 things need to happen before someone hires you. Again, this is things that people get wrong all the time. The first thing that needs to happen is they need to see that life can be different, right? Clients pay for possibility. Now, most coaches do that pretty well, right? And especially if you come from a 3P perspective, you can talk to someone and if they understand a little bit of what you're going to teach them, their life's going to be massively different. So you can talk about the possibility. You can say life can be different. You can help paint that picture. You can help them see what that might look like. But that's not enough. Well, if you're not doing that, first of all, do that bit first, right? Most people get that bit done. But then there's a second piece. They've got to live life differently, right? It's kind of the try before you buy. So people need to have that. And I did this, Steve Chandler and I did this event in London recently. And I did this, there's this company called Crosstown, and they make the most amazing donuts. And I'm not a donut guy. And I went into this shop in Brick Lane in London, and I bought this peanut butter and jelly donut. And it was to die for, right? It was amazing. And I kept talking about it. We had these 2 days, and I kept talking about these donuts because there was a shop around the corner from where we were doing the event. And like 2 or 3 people went and tried the donuts over a couple of days. On the final day when we were finishing, I went and bought a box of these donuts for everyone, right? And everyone tried them. And the thing was, I said, now here's the thing. Now that you've tried these donuts, you don't need to go and decide whether you want more or not. like, you don't need to decide whether you'd want to, you know, they're there, you've tried it, right? And that's why you see a lot of shops that sell donuts, cookies. You'll see them outside going, hey, do you want to try some? There's a pretzel stand in Birmingham where I'm from, and they sell these really nice cinnamon pretzels. And I hadn't bought one for years, but every time I'd walk past, there'd be someone giving out a free taster. And once you taste it, you know, there's no decision, there's no trust involved. You know what you're going to pay for. You're like, oh, this is what I'm paying for. It's nice. And it's the same thing with coaching, right? If the client sees that talking to you, life is a little bit different, and it's not just possibility, they see it, right? Oh, can we just mute Carmony? Amir, I think you can do that. Then you know, it's not an intellectual thing for them, and that's the problem with a lot of clients. They feel like, oh, Jacob, like, you charge €1,000 or €2,000 or €5,000 or £500, whatever you charge. I don't know. That's a lot of money. I need to talk to my wife about it. That's because they don't know that it's going to help them, right? They haven't experienced it yet, a change. And so, like, when I started working with Jamie Smart, I had been coached by him for a 20-minute session on something I'd been stuck on for 2 years. And he coached me, and in 20 minutes, I had an insight. I saw things differently. So I didn't need to work out whether this guy was a good coach or not. I'd experienced it, right? There was no, you know, I still had to make a decision about signing up for a year, but I'd experienced his coaching, right? And that's the same with every other person that I've hired. Normally, I've had an experience with them. There was a guy who I hired before I worked with Jamie, non-3 principles coach. He spent 3 hours, 4 hours on the phone with me. I'd never had anyone do that with me before. He sent me a ton of material. He was selling me a very expensive, several $1,000 program. And I got all this stuff off him for free. That's what helped me sign up, because it was no longer an intellectual thing. I was like, oh, I'm watching these things. This guy's talking to me, and oh, it's helpful. And I feel different. I'm being different, right? Now, some people will say, well, if I give everything away for free, why would they hire me, right? Well, here's the thing. I personally, I feel like I'm an all right coach. I think I've been doing this for a while. I think I'm all right. I don't think I can completely, for most people, I don't think I can have 2 conversations with someone and their problems are completely fixed. I don't think I can have someone in 2 conversations completely understand the true spiritual nature of their soul, right? I'm good. I'm not that good, right? So it doesn't matter if I spend 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions with people, and I really help them have a shift. Coaching, it's an ongoing process. And if they want to pay for the ongoing process, then they pay for the ongoing process, right? I'm not kind of selling them a tool, right? Once I've told you how the tool works, then you're going to take it and never come back. Does that make sense? I've kind of like got on my soapbox and talked a lot there.
No, look, a lot of what you're saying is what I already do. The question for me, where it sticks mostly, is, okay, so now you've done the 3 hours. And like, at what point, like, someone says, okay, I have a session, they have an insight or not. It's, you know, our next steps is this, is it yes or no? Or when is it for you? When do you, like, for me, my problem, my challenge is that if I go into these conversations and I have another one and I have another one, this person turns from a prospect, client, whatever, into a friend. And this whole, it's in my head, it gets all very mucky. Like, nobody's ever dead to me. Like, you're now my friend, and how can I even charge you? Let me just help you. And that is my challenge. And I have people paying me. I have people paying me out of the blue or after one conversation, and I'm very clear. And this is what I do. These are agreements. I got Steve Chandler is my. Yeah, I got most of his books, and I love the way he talks about coaching. So there's a lot of what you just said is what I already, you know, over the years have incorporated. It's just like, okay, so now we have a third session, and this person says, oh, this is really great. Can we do it again? Now I'm going to say, well, no, unless you pay me. Like, you're not that to me, but you have to start paying me. Or where does that? And it's interesting because I had the conversation with people where it just went like, wow, it was just automatic. Like, they asked me, I send it off, they paid, whatever. And then there are these people that are just, they're near bankruptcy, and I'm just talking to them, and they say, oh, this is so great, it's so great. And 9 months later, they're all of a sudden, from being in the red in their business, they're in the black. But no, it's like, when do I say, or when does a coach say it's enough? Or how do you cut that conversation into, I'm a professional coach? Because everybody knows that when we get on the phone or on the conversation, I'm a professional coach. They know. Oh, for me, it's like when people say, some people ask, so the very first question is, so how much is it? I'm like, well, let's not even talk about that. Like, I know that's for me, that's disqualifies them if they keep on about the price. For me, that's like a turn off. Like, you just want me to spit out my price so you can call some other people and then say, oh, well, he's twice as expensive, so I go with him. That's how I sometimes see it when people ask about the price. But when is it, okay, I've served you. I know I served you. I made a freaking difference. I can tell because it's what you keep telling me. And now you're speaking to your daughter, or now your business is in the black when it was in the red when we first talked. Or when do I, or how is it?
Can I take a stab at it too? Do you think I can take a stab?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course.
What I'm hearing, the first mistake that I'm hearing, okay, do you mind if I pick on you?
I'm used to it. Fine.
Okay, yeah, exactly. You've already been with me for a while. The idea is serve, 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 charge. Serve, 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 charge. And then so we get stuck in the, well, when do I go from service to charge? I don't see it that way. Charging is part of my service. The way that I can serve a client is by making the fact that I charge very clear, because what that starts from really from the beginning. See, what I like about what Ankush said is he shows up as a professional coach before the coaching has begun. Okay. Part of showing up as a professional coach is, you'll notice he said, I will make them do this. I'll ask them this question. I'll tell them, this is not a right fit. I'll move. What he's doing is he's already directing who is in charge of this conversation. When you're a coach, your role is to lead. What happens in a lot of principals community, in our community, is we are afraid to be the leader. We go, well, we're all the same. Everyone's the same one, the universe, and we do this crap to each other. Next thing you know, we're all one. And this guy says, well, why am I going to charge you if we're all one? Well, that makes sense. That's actually a really legitimate question. What I say is, in order to serve you, so I'll give you, because you look like you like direct examples, because you like my last thing I said. I'm going to give you an example. I have 2 calls with you, Jacob. On the last of my 2 calls, this is what I would say. Jacob, man, did you really like this conversation? Jacob, yes, it was mind-blowing. Oh my God, I'd love, can we put another one on the calendar? I would love to put another one on the calendar, Jacob, but in order to serve you like I do all my other clients, we're going to have to discuss what it would look like moving forward. Because in order for me to give you my undivided attention for an hour, as I do for my other clients, this is what it would look like. Would you like another hour that's undivided just for you? See, what money does is it allows us to give people access to us 100%. So it's actually part of the service. See, it's not service, 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 money. It's service, money, service, money, service, money. That is why you guys are on this call right now. You gave me money, and instead of being on a call with 80 people, you're getting all the attention for now, right? And that cost you $97. Okay, that was $97 and you got to talk to me or Ankush. So that is service. So the question isn't, well, when do I start? You better have that conversation quick, because then you're not serving them if you're not having that conversation. So I don't know how you got it in your mind that stops you from being of service. It's actually quite the opposite. It puts you more into service to the person you're specifically speaking to. So I look forward to talking about money with clients, because I know they're going to have my undivided attention once they pay me. Because look, I get 30 emails a day. Hey, I want to pick your brain. Can we chat? I don't have time for that. Do you know why? Because I'm getting on calls with you who paid me. So there's a lot of people that try to get me to talk to them. And a lot of times they say, F you, Amir, you know what? I thought you're someone that wants to help people. I get emails like that all the time. And what they don't realize is, yeah, I have to block my time. Because if I don't block my time, you don't get my undivided attention. My wife doesn't get my undivided attention. My daughter doesn't get my undivided attention. So I made up this arbitrary thing, a key to my kingdom called money. It's made up, but I've decided that's a really good, useful metaphor in my life to say, this is how you have access to me. So if anything, that is coming of tremendous service. Our community needs to stop looking at money as a block, or, okay, now this is when it starts to get weird. No, we should start looking at money as one of the biggest catalysts to be able to serve people. Money is the biggest catalyst for people to be able to say, you're going to be with me. It costs this much. I don't care if it was cookies. If you want to have cookies and you say, look, ship me cookies from Saudi Arabia, the best cookies and tea, and that was enough for you to block an hour, I don't care. Who cares? It doesn't have to be money. I'm just saying it's in exchange for you to have my undivided attention. Does that make sense? Mm. So the question to you, Jacob, is when are you ready to have that dialogue? And what I just said to you is what I actually tell my clients. I charge, how much do you charge? $1,200. Ooh, that's a lot. And I say, I know. Well, how do you justify that? Well, because spending time with my wife probably costs $20,000 an hour. So you're actually getting a really good deal for $12,000 to spend an hour with me a week, $1,200 or whatever. I think that's a really good deal, because honestly, I'd rather spend time with my wife. But since we're going to have a working relationship, I want to be able to devote 1 hour for you. And this is what it's going to entail. What do you think? Now, if they say no, perfect. Someone else will give me $1,200 and they will have that 1 hour allotted slot for them. And I'm okay with that. I'm in no rush. If someone's in what you said, a red zone, and they don't have money, well, I'm not going to have this dialogue about give me $1,200. They don't have money. I'll say, have a nice day, and I'll do whatever I need to do, but I'm not going to have 4, 5, 6, 7 conversations. That's probably why they're in the red zone, because they don't value money. They don't know how to value money. That's why I'm making an assumption, but the very thing that you want to help them with, you're actually dissuading them, because you're saying money's not valuable for you either. I don't know. Well, you're in the red and now we're friends and now I'm a little bit scared. Well, you're teaching them that, hey, anything goes. My time's not valuable. My money's not valuable. My coaching profession's not valuable. And you know what? You're in the red. Let's have 2 people. Let's have the poor feed the poor and let's see where it goes. Doesn't work for me like that. I set the precedent. I know this sounds, I'm getting really heated, but I set the precedent. I'm the coach. This is how it works to work with me. This is what it costs. Yes or no? Okay, great. Have a nice day, or I'll see you next Tuesday. That's it. And we're done. And this is how I get my clients. Mic drop. Did that make sense, Jacob? I don't know if that makes sense for you.
Absolutely.
I wrote so much stuff down. If I can I add to that?
Yes.
Is that all right? Unless, Jacob, have you got something to say first?
No, I mean, as I said earlier, there's so much that that is sort of confirmation that what I'm doing is what a coach does. But it's just to hear other people say it, and to get a bit of clarity is very valuable. Thank you. Yeah, and add all you want.
So I wrote down like 5 or 6 things in no particular order. And by the way, when you ask the question, if Amir or I were working with you privately, I mean, this is something that, this is actually a big topic. So this is, you know, it doesn't surprise me we're talking a lot about it, and it's useful because this is something I would typically work with someone probably over a number of sessions, right? So, but I hope this will be helpful. So when we talk about, Amir said, you know, about me showing up as a professional coach before the conversation. Like one of the things I wrote down, which I haven't done, I used to talk about, but I'd forgotten actually, was about language. And this is funny because I've never been into NLP. I didn't like NLP. But when I came across the principles, weirdly, my thinking dropped about NLP and about language, right? And I started paying more attention to language. It was very odd. And I realized the language that I use with people is important, right? So if I'm talking to someone, I'm like, hey friend, right? And, you know, like there's certain language that I use, which is more of a professional language that I'll use with someone, right? So I remember and this is less so now because I think I'm more established and people know what I do. But when I was starting out, when someone would reach out and would set up a conversation, I would say things like, you know, they'd say, can we talk? I would say, yeah, sure. Let me block out an hour in my calendar, right? That language is very, very different to, sure, I got some time, let's chat, right? I never use the word chat. I say, let's block out the time in my calendar. I say, let's have a conversation, right? I don't say, let's have a deep 2-hour powerful coaching. I find that a bit weird, but I do want to keep my language professional, right? And so I never get into I don't say, well, maybe not never, but I rarely get into the realm of people thinking I'm their friend, because I don't show up as their friend. The way I talk to my friends is very different to the way I talk to my clients in most ways, right? And funnily enough, I have a couple of friends of mine who are now clients. There's one guy in particular, he's signed up, and there's another guy who's one of my best mates in the world, and he said he wanted to get a coach, and I said, well, would you want me to work with you? And he said, oh, but we're friends. And I went, why don't we have a few sessions? So I gifted him 3 sessions. We've just had 2. And I told him, look, when I get on the call with you, I'm going to show up as a coach, and I want you to show up as a client. And he said, that's what I want. And so when we talk, it's very, very different to me talking to a friend. When I'm talking to a friend, I'm laughing, I'm joking, I'm playing around, right? When I'm talking to him as a coach, I'm really different. I'm calling him out on stuff. I'm challenging. It does not, it's a little bit uncomfortable for him, if I'm honest, right? The way we go, it does not get confused with friendship, right? So that language and the questions is one thing. It's funny because as I was writing down the word leadership, Amir talked about leadership, so it's great that we're on the same page. And again, one of the things I learned from Steve was about role reversal, right? And I have this thing where I don't call my clients, they call me. Even if I have someone who's a prospective client, I will not call them. You know, we'll set up the time and I'll say, yes, I've got time on Tuesday afternoon at 2:00. Please call me at 2, right? I have a relatively new client. He reached out to me the other day and he said, I'm ready when you are. I said, I'm ready, right? And he said, great. And then I replied back, call me. So he calls me and he said, that was a bit weird. That's a technique. And I went, yeah. He was expecting me to say no. And I said, yes, it is a technique. It's a technique to stop us stop us having role reversal, because you're paying for someone to show up as your coach. I don't want this to get weird. And I said, and this guy's a coach, I said, when you have your clients do the same thing, because it just keeps it clean, right? There's no exceptions. This is how it's going to work. You will call me. We'll have some time. That's it, right? We block the time in. This is how it works. And it's very easy for people to get into that whole thing about role reversal. You call them, you know, you're reaching, let me check in with you, as opposed to they're reaching out for support and guidance, which is what a coach does. And by the way, I have a coach, right? Steve's been my coach for nearly 4 years. I really, really like him. We do have a laugh and a joke, you know, because we've had a relationship for a long time. But I really respect the fact that when I'm on a call with him, right, we're coaching. And I like the fact that he sticks to that, because that's what I'm paying for. If he turned into my friend, that would be great, but I wouldn't be paying him for that. I don't want to pay him for that. I want to pay him to be my coach, to call me out on things, to challenge me on things, to help me see things that I'm not seeing myself, to look at things from a step back. It's a very different relationship. The other thing that I made a note on was example of clients, right? So one thing that I do that I realize, especially with someone who's new to coaching, maybe never hired a coach before, especially people who've never hired me before, I'll give them example of clients. So if someone ends up in a conversation with me, and let's say they're really busy-minded, right? I will tell them about a time where I had and these are not lies, this is true. I'll tell them about a time where I had someone who hired me. They were very busy-minded. This is a true story. And he worked with me for 6 months. And it took us time to really kind of help him see the world differently. Now I'll tell him that story, right? If someone was telling me about, you know, maybe they've got an addiction, I'll tell them about the time where a client hired me who was addicted to pornography. And again, we worked together over a period of time to help him see how his thinking about the world was reinforcing his addiction, and then him beating himself up about the addiction was that, right? But it takes time. Now, this isn't, again, it's not a manipulation. It's helping the client see that the best thing they can have from coaching is regular coaching, right? Having the odd session here or there, I found, doesn't seem to lead to transformation. I mean, this is even true not for coaching, but just with Sid Banks, right? You saw that Sid spent a lot of time with Chip and Elsie, and you know, there were a few people very close to him he spent a lot of time with. And then there were a whole bunch of people that he would see him once a year, once every couple of years on doing some kind of seminar, right? And there's a complete difference between the people he spent a lot of time with and the people that saw him from far away. You see the people that were closest to him, that had more access to him and more time with him, have got a deeper understanding. They had more transformation, all other things being equal, right? And I see the same thing with coaching. I can take someone much further in 6 months than I can take someone in 2 sessions. But it's my job to help people see that, because they don't know how it works, right? They've not had coaching before. They've not had coaching with me before. They don't know what I do. So by giving them client examples, they start to realize, without me even selling them anything, but they start to see, oh, okay, this is how working with Ankush looks like. It tends to be over a number of months. It tends to be, you know, in this way. One question I had for you is, you say, you know, I'm doing a lot of what you guys say already, but when do I switch? The question I had for you is, are people asking you, Jacob, how do we work together? You're muted, by the way.
The question I get is like, how much is it?
And is that a regular thing?
I wouldn't. Well, it's either that or again and I see that I see where my downfall is in like within those conversations, not to lead the lack of leadership from my side within those first conversations, rather to really take it as a pick it as a leader. It seems to me that the leadership comes after, or not at the very beginning, where it's probably most important. The people, if people ask, seldom people ask, how do we work together? People always ask, how much is it? And then I say, well, I can explain to you how I work with others. And they say, yeah, how does it work? And then I can but it's also very much in the moment. I sometimes think I have my set fees, but they're never set. They always seem to be different.
Yeah, I mean, if people, for me, I played a game a few years ago, about 2.5 years ago, I started playing a game, and my game was, I'm not going to make any proposals to anyone. I'm only going to tell people ask to work with me, I'll tell them how it works. And I played this game, and it was shit scary, right? Like you can imagine, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to propose to anyone anymore. Like what's going to happen? And so I would have, a couple of conversations with people. And at the end of the second conversation, I would say, so are we complete? And if they said yes, I'd say, well, it's been great talking to you. If I can serve you any more in the future, let me know. And I put the phone down, right? And you don't need to do this, right? This is what I did. And what I found was it helped me save a hell of a lot of time. Because, well, two things. One, it forced me to take leadership in the conversation and really show up powerfully as a coach. So they knew what they were getting, right? They knew what coaching was. They experienced it. And it forced me to be really good because I wanted them to say, wow, this is amazing. What would it take to be a client of yours, right? How can we move this forward? And if they didn't, by the time I said, are we complete? They were like, no, I want more. Don't stop. I want more, right? On the flip side, what it did is it saved me a whole load of time because if I did that and after 2 sessions or 3 sessions, they weren't asking about how it might look like for us to work together, they're not going to pay me. And like Amir says, you haven't got unlimited time and resources, right? So you move on and you've helped them already. You've done, great service by helping them for 2 or 3 sessions. They might come back in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, who knows, right? And that's happened to me. I've had people come back, after years, but it was just clear cut. So that's something to ask yourself. And this is when I said, it's not that you're not that good, but people are missing things in the coaching. When people say to me, hey, I'm a really good coach, but I get stuck on the proposal, that's not what's going on. When I've seen the best coaches, the way they show up in those first 2 conversations or the first conversation is so different that people are saying to them, I don't want this to end, right? They don't have this whole thing around making a proposal, going back to my wife, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of, and like I said, we're kind of covering this really quickly because we're on this short call, but that hopefully will be helpful. The other thing was that I had written down was when I started coaching full time in 2015. One of the things that I realized was it had taken me a long time to get my understanding to the level that it was, right? It wasn't an instant thing. And one of the things I think about in this community, and I might be wrong and maybe I'll change my mind in the future, but I always heard Sid say, and a lot of people say, you can see this in an instant. And he would say that because he saw it in an instant. And I think the principles transforms people faster than anything else that I know. And I will never say people can get transformed in an instant, because what I found was when I would say that, they'd be looking for their one Hollywood insight. What I found 999 times out of 1,000, right? Probably even more than that. Like for our purposes, every time, 100% of the time, it takes people some repetition. Even Keith Blevins, who I've worked with, Amir's worked with, he will say, I will not talk to you for less than 10 sessions. It doesn't matter how long you've been around the principles. And I asked him, I said, well, why do you say that, Keith? Because when I hired him, I'd already done a year's worth of training with Jamie Smart. And I'd met him. I'd done a 3-day, part of that included a 3-day with Keith in a small group. I said, Keith, why do you say this minimum 10? And he said, because it takes a lot of repetition. People think they know what I'm talking about, but they don't. And it takes that time. And I really experienced that. So when I started coaching full time, I realized that I could talk about the principles, either talk about it or I could coach, and people could have 1 or 2 sessions with me and they could go, oh, this is great. But they had no idea what they were paying for. So what I started saying to people was, just so that you know, I'm just scratching the surface in this call around what I can tell you. And again, that sounds like a technique or a manipulation. It wasn't. It was just the truth, right? Because if someone heard me, I was in Vegas in January 2015, and I was talking about my story and whatever at this success conference. And I told, that was the first time I did this, and I told everyone, I'm just scratching the surface of what I do. Now, what happened was I got 5 clients out of that talk, right? I did 2 talks over 2 days, and I got 5 clients out of it. Now, some of them came back and went, oh, that concept about thought was really good. What else can you teach me, right? I said, well, when we just talked, and they signed up with me, and when they signed up, I went, oh, it's seeing that deeper, right? And afterwards, they knew why I'd said that, because 6 months down the road, they were like, oh my God, I knew nothing from that talk. What I thought I knew was nothing. But I had to walk them. This is part of leadership. I had to walk them through that. This isn't just a technique. I'm telling you, you're feeling, you're thinking, and I'm just going to tell you the same technique. It's not about that. So again, telling clients about how this works with other clients, client stories, your own stories about how, this is kind of more for the long term, and what long-term or medium to long-term coaching does, right? That again helps them see it, because they don't know, right? You go to for someone for hypnosis, typically it's 1, 2, 3 sessions, right? They don't know. They will put it in the same category, right? They don't know that it's a long-term thing. So, you don't need to, but what I do is I tell people we're just scratching the surface where it's true. Now, I will say this. I once had a guy reach out to me with a really specific problem. I helped him with that really specific problem. He asked me, what does it look like to work with you? And I said, well, do you need any more help? Have you got anything else you want to work on? Because it seems like we've solved your problem. And he went, no, I'm good. And I went, so go get along, go away. It's fine. So this is, again, it's not about manipulating people into working with you long term. And I've been accused of that. Some coaches say you should do this long term. No, this is about serving the client. It's all from a place of service. So if you've got someone who just says, do you know what, I'm really struggling with this talk I've got to give, and I'm up in my head, and you can maybe give them a few words of wisdom, great. But if someone's coming to you and what they're really struggling with, and it might come out of that conversation is something deeper, well, let them know that, to really nail that, it's going to take a bit of time, right? And it has done I'm assuming for all of us, it's taken us time. What we thought of when we first heard about the principles to what we think now is vastly different, right? Bene, for you too. I mean, if you do a workshop, it's worthwhile telling people, I'm just going to be scratching the surface here. I'm going to give you a real, overview level around the mind and relation to communication. It helps them, because if you don't do that, they think, well, this is all you do, and that's all there is to learn, and there's nothing else to learn from it. The final thing is something that I struggled with for a long time, and Steve would tell me, nothing commits people more than money, right? And I'll be like, well, that's outside in, that doesn't. And you know what? I just seen it time and time again, and this is my current view on it. What is money, right? And I'm not going to say it's a thought. To me, money is energy. It's a unit of measure, right? If you produce something of value, people pay you for it, okay? And it's a unit of measure. It's a measure of energy. So the way I look at it is, if people are going to pay me money for coaching, they're saying, I'm going to invest this much of value in you, right? It's a value exchange. And to me, that is about commitment, because if I don't really value something, I don't really spend a lot of money on it, right? The more I value something, the more I spend money on it. So if I really value coaching, which I do, and Steve is not a cheap coach, he's not a low-cost coach, right? If I value coaching with Steve, which I do, I'm prepared to put a lot of money into it, which is something that is limited, right? In my world, I don't have access to unlimited money, and I've worked hard to create that money, to create value for people, to create that money. Well, I'm spending that on Steve and saying, this is important to me, and I'm going to put this much money towards it because I value it. And then I show up differently. And we would all do that, right? Like if you put on you're wearing a nice Lacoste top there, right? If you got another top, which was from Poundland or something, right? You would treat the two tops differently. You can know the principles until you're blue in the face, but you would treat them differently. And on the other hand, if you had I don't know, Sergio Fergamame, whatever the guy is, he's 300 pounds, 400 pounds for a top, right? You would treat that one differently. We do. The clothes that are nicer, let me hand wash this. Yeah, something cheap. I'll just stick it in the washing machine. Who cares? It'll be fine, right? We value things differently. And it's the same thing with coaching. And what people are paying for is for their lives to be different. And I'm like, I've realized this whole leadership thing, I'm really firm with clients now. So I realized I'd kind of let things slide. But now, at the beginning, you know, without being awkward about it, but I really let people know, right? Like I had a client the other day. He said, I'll call next week. I can take it at that time, but I'm going to be in the car. Is that all right? And I said, no. I said, let's schedule it for later in the day, but I want to do it when you're in a quiet place and you can concentrate. And he came back and said, do you know what? Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for that. I'm trying to show them this is the most important time, right? This time is for them. It's the most important time. It's not about me. It's not about you need to give me your attention. No, you need to give you your attention. And that all starts from me. So all of this stuff kind of ties into, you know, what you get paid, right? It all ties in because it's for them. Now, as long as don't use this as a shortcut to get paid high fees, right? I could talk for another hour on this topic, as you can probably tell. It's not a shortcut to get paid high fees, but it's coming from a place of service to the client, right? And delivering something that's of value. So when I charge clients, like my immersion events next year are going to be £2,000. In my head, I'm already thinking, how can I create a £5,000 experience? How can I create something that I think is worth £5,000 so that my clients will pay me too, right? It's that mindset. So it's not about saying, oh, pay me 5,000 because you'll need it more. No, that's on me. My job is to create something really valuable, but it's also their job to invest in themselves. And so when Amir sees that people paying us is helpful to them, this whole conversation will be different. This whole question will be different. I'm aware of the time, Amir. So yeah. Is that useful, Jacob?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Benny has, so I was going to say, we're actually half an hour over our initial talk. So thank you for all you guys for sticking around. I think Benny has one thing to say, maybe. So before we wrap it up. Or I'll start.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thanks. Actually, when you said the thing about creating a 5K experience, that made me feel totally different. I'm always questioning how to price when I do a consultancy job, and that made me feel value, give myself value for what I offer. And I really thank you for all of that, because that's been really helpful for me, giving value to what I do and kind of feeling better about it, if that makes sense.
Oh, you're welcome, Benny. I'm glad it's helpful. I got referred a book. I don't know if anyone's heard this book. It's called The $1 Million Consultant, and someone sent it to me years ago about this guy who made $1 million as a consultant. Don't write this down because I'm going to trash the book. So I read the first few pages, and one of the key things in this book was don't give people any more money, don't give them any more value than they've paid for. So this guy was saying, look, as a consultant, people hire you to go into a company, give them this much consultancy. And then they said, oh, can you do this? Can you do this? And he said, if you want to be $1 million consultant, you need to charge them for the additional services. And I stopped reading the book. The book was so thick. I was 2 pages in. I said, not for me, right? And my philosophy has been the exact opposite. It's like, if people are paying me X, how can I deliver X plus? How can I always over deliver? And I found this, that the coaches that over deliver, and Steve does this with me, I try and do this with my clients. The people that over deliver are are well rewarded and people are happy to pay them, right? But when you only deliver what you're paid for, that's when you get in your own head, or certainly for me, I get in my head about like, oh, is this really worth it? Whereas when I know this is a bargain, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's $100 or £100, or whether it's 5,000 or whether it's 50,000. Like I can create a $50,000 program, which in my mind is worth 200. And if I ever did create one, that's how I would do it. I wouldn't want to create a $50,000 program that in my head is worth 50,000. I want to create one that's worth way more than that in my mind. Because then it's just easy. Because then I can go to someone, it's only 50 grand. This is a bargain, right? And I think that with my immersions, it's only 2 grand. I think that with my coaching, it's only 6 grand, right? Like I want to always keep it as in my head a bargain. And I was talking to someone about this today. When I started coaching, I didn't start with a point of view of what can people pay, what can they afford. I started with what would be really, really cool, and then what would that cost? What would be really helpful to people, and what would that cost, right? And so I'm starting from a place of a really, really cool product, service, whatever. And that's why I stopped predominantly. I still might do it now and then, but predominantly I've stopped doing 3-month coaching packages because I just thought they weren't deep enough. And so now typically I work with people for a minimum of 6 months. That's just happened over time. But I was like, and I say to people, you just save your money. Don't do something short and waste your time.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
So
Awesome.
Wow, this was quite an in-depth. I didn't know how deep we're going to go, but this was great. I loved hearing you as well, man. Just listening and chatting and joining you guys. So thank you for, first of all, a farewell, because I didn't do a farewell. If you don't know Ankush, you just bagged on a 3-month program. I just did a 3-month program, which means we have to continue because it's too short apparently for Ankush. But what I was going to say is, I forgot to say bye to you guys and say how appreciative I was of our time together and the conversations we had. And, you know, fixing Jacob has been such a blessing for me for the last 3 months. And I just wanted to tell you how valuable that that is. But no, in all seriousness though, thank you for you guys for being here and taking the time and playing with me and playing this game and learning and getting off the calls, coming back and saying you guys have tried stuff. And I'm going to post, you guys have started to see, like I mentioned to you guys before, I'm getting a lot of people that are calling me, and I thought that I'm a principles guy. I didn't know that I'm now becoming the guy that people want to talk about coaching with as far as how to build a coaching practice. I'm not going to get into it with you guys here now, but Ankush and I are going to be doing something. I'm going to post in the big group. Same thing as you guys know here. If it's something you guys want to do, I'd love you guys to have, if it makes sense for you, if you guys are coaches. If it's not, if you're not a coach, don't do it. There's plenty of other things to do. So we'll get to that when we get to, when I get to it. But the bottom line is, thank you for each and every one of you guys for being here. Thank you for listening. And Kush, you know, I'll tell you a secret, man. We're doing an event together, but it's secretly for me to become a better coach, man. And I'm listening to you and I'm becoming a better coach. So I feel like I'm cheating this one on this one. So thank you so much, dude, for everything that you do.
No, thank you for having me. And I feel privileged to be at the end of this 3-month program, and I'm obviously joining on along. But no, it's been an honor and a privilege, and I hope it's been useful what I've shared with people.
Okay. Thanks to both of you guys, and thanks, Amir, for the program. That was great.
Thank you, guys, and I'll see you guys in the other group, and I'm sure I'll still stay connected with you, all you. And Vic, were you just waving or you're pausing?
I'm just saying bye. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay, bye, you guys. Bye, Nicholas and Anne Marie. You guys aren't showing up, but I just spoke 3 months in one go. You did. Nicholas, you're there. What's up, man? It's good to see you. And yeah, we'll stay in touch. You guys feel free, if anything that Ankush and I were saying, there's still a question in the back of your mind, email us, contact us, and we'll give it a go. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.